Hello and welcome to Storytelling.
Kevin is my name. Raised by an overbearing mother and her flying monkey sisters, I come from a broken family. The eldest, Megan, was 13 years my senior, and Anna was 10. They all said that my birth was the reason why my parents separated, so I suppose I was an accident and wasn't planned. I was 5 when my dad moved out of the house in 1977 and never came back. I experienced bullying all through my childhood, both inside the security of my home and at school. All I wanted was for my mother to adore me, to pat me on the back, and to let me know that I'm a member of the family. It never took place. I committed myself to my studies because I was good at them and had tried for the previous 12 years of my life. After a few years, I ended up at South London's Kingston University in 1993. Being away from my home made me very happy. I met Holly here, and I can still picture her from that time. She exuded confidence and beauty. Conversely, I was quiet and reserved. While I was completing my master's degree in mechanical engineering and design, she was in her last year of a creative writing program. As I previously mentioned, she was constantly receiving attention from men, and I was far too shy to approach her. I was surprised when Holly came over to hang out with me and one of her friends started talking to me at the party. I didn't have much experience with women, and I believe that my shyness and humility attracted her. We started dating after I worked up the nerve to ask her out. Although I'm not ashamed to admit that she stole my virginity, I learned after about 6 months of dating that she had been seeing other men. I was scared to tell her, and I had no way to prove it. Caroline, Holly's sister, and Holly herself were lavished with attention by their parents. I had to put up with her acting like a princess for the most of our relationship. She would make a scene and not think twice to cause trouble in public if she didn't get her way, which only made me feel embarrassed. My friends thought I should get rid of her since they couldn't stand her, but I fell in love, something I had never truly experienced before. After graduating, we each got employment and succeeded in locating apartments outside of Southampton, Hampshire. That was where her family was from, and I had long since cut ties with mine. After a year of marriage, we welcomed Sophie into the world the next year, and Ava shortly after that a few years later. From that point on, everything seemed to be going well between us. Holly loved being a mother. After receiving a few promotions, I began working for Walker Engineering 10 years ago. Our ability to save for a better house was aided by our bonuses and increased pay. But 2008 was a terrible year for me and most people on the planet. Due to the economic downturn, many people lost their jobs and it became more difficult to get contracts. As a result, we all had to step up and work longer hours without receiving any additional pay. At this point, when both girls were enrolled full-time, I became aware that Holly was sleeping with a student from our previous university. I was so preoccupied with my work that by the time it was over, I had no idea who he was. Toby, my closest friend, assumed it was a boy from her class who had moved in the neighborhood. When I once confronted her about it, she simply laughed in my face and told me to get over my foolishness. However, I knew she was lying. I was in a great position to purchase a lovely house because I was able to keep my job and earn a good salary. Holly always made fun of me for not owning a home appropriate for our status, whatever that meant. But I gave in, as I always did, and together we purchased a lovely 5-bedroom detached home in Southampton. We got a decent deal even though the mortgage was a little steep because it was a buyer's market at the time. Opening a new savings account in my name alone was one thing I did that was against my better judgment. All I put in it was my annual bonus. I don't think Holly would have known about it, even if I waved the receipts under her nose, since I am the only provider for the family and handle all banking and finances. Looking back, I think this was one of the best decisions I could have made. I wasn't sure if Holly was going to dump me if the ex-boyfriend came back, so I needed some security. Everything seemed to return to some semblance of normalcy after the affair, and the girls were always my first priority. I made sure to spend a lot of time with them on the weekends and supported them in their academic endeavors. Actually, more times than I can recall, I was the one who took them to dance classes, concerts, and the zoo. Holly's other pampered and slothful pals always seemed to be too preoccupied when they went out for coffee. Though I didn't spend much time with the other husbands, we all seemed to be in different ways controlled and henpecked. When I had to change plans to accommodate Holly, my friends would sing Under My Thumb by the Rolling Stones to me. The guys on the factory floor would also make remarks about my marital status, focusing on Holly's power over me. It all reached a boiling point just a few months ago. After Ava left for university, Holly and I were on our own for the first time in 18 years. After I had finished moving Ava's things into the apartment she would be sharing with her sister, the girls, who were both attending our old alma mater, turned to me and asked why I was even with their mother. She had always been such a quiet girl, much like her old dad, so I was in complete shock. "I heard she's screwing around with Henry Walker at your company," Ava replied. Even now, as she spoke, I can still see the tears in her eyes. Though I was unaware of it, I was not shocked. I could have looked into her affairs for years, but I never did out of concern that it would destroy the family, cause my girls to suffer, and make them hate me the way my sisters did my father. The alternative did not bear consideration, so I let her pet me. Though I still loved her, I was even more in love with what we had made. I was affected in a lot of ways by this news. First of all, I was shocked to learn how much more hostile my girls felt toward their mother than I could have ever imagined. I knew they were disappointed that I hadn't taken a more firm stand with Holly, but they still loved and respected me. Second, it reminded me of past animosities I had toward the women in my childhood and how those feelings contributed to my flaws. At last, I realized that I was being openly ridiculed and talked about by the employees at work, especially Henry Walker, the man cucking me and who just so happened to be Jack's nephew. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't continue to put up with this, especially since my youngest daughter was now aware of Holly making fun of me. I knew I needed to speak with her. As I sat at the kitchen table waiting for Holly to come home, my heart was pounding. When at last she did show up, I discovered I could not speak. Once more, her expression on my face was one of disdain and indifference. She emptied her bags into the cupboards without saying anything to me. At last, I said something. With a hint of blush, but without hesitation, she turned to face me and asked, "Are you having an affair, Holly?" "I wouldn't call it an affair, darling." Despite being horrified and appalled by her admission, I waited silently for her to clarify that she didn't consider screwing another man to be an affair. "You are a wonderful man, Kevin. You're a great provider, and you're my best friend. But there are things you can't provide me, and I'm not ashamed to say I want it all," she stated with candor. "So, you're cheating on me?" I asked, shocked at her blatantly immoral behavior. "Only my body," she said, "not my heart or my mind, Kevin. That belongs to you." Her words made my stomach turn over and my head spin. What she was saying was so blatantly cheeky that it left me dumbfounded. "I never deny you sex, Kevin, and all I'm doing is exploring with a couple of younger guys," she said. I cried out, "What?" My response won her back, and I never raised my voice. "Don't shout at me, Kevin," she said, gathering her courage, as she moved around the table and sat down across from me. "You admit to cheating on me with 2 guys, and I'm supposed to be quiet?" I responded. "I love you, Kevin, but this is how things are going to be. Live with it or I'll leave and be with him anyway," she said, threatening and demanding of me at the same time. I sat there staring at her. I briefly believed that she had noticed the hurt on my face when her expression softened. "Everyone does it these days, Kevin. My friends have had flings with younger men, and they say it makes the marriage better," she continued. I was taken aback. Before, I was having trouble processing everything, but now Holly was genuinely attempting to defend her adultery by telling me that all of her friends had also cheated. The idea that it would improve our marriage was, to put it mildly, disdainful. She was only interested in the safety and comfort I could offer, she had no interest in the marriage or me. I said it once more. After giving me a brief glance, she laughed in my face and said, "So, I can have another woman, is that what you're saying, Holly?" She laughed a little longer, then tried to gather herself before I sat in silence. She was laughing and openly mocking me, and I felt ashamed and embarrassed, but she wouldn't stop. "You're right, Kevin, come on, be serious. you struggle to speak to women you have known for years. What chance are you going to have to chat someone else up, she said. She left me at the table, thinking about what had just happened to my life, my world. This is how it's going to be, Kevin, so don't ruin a good thing. I'm still your wife, I still love you, and I still come home to you every night. Do not mess up your life by complaining about it or doing something you'll regret. She was so honest about her activities that I came to understand she had no affection for me at all. Even though I didn't mind, she didn't have the right to be a cheater because all of her friends weren't. Furthermore, she actually had the gall to threaten me. I was furious, very furious. I slept in the spare room that night. I couldn't bear to be close to her. However, Holly woke me up at midnight and demanded to know why I wasn't going to bed. Was she truly this naive? I was aware of her affluence, but really? Oh, come on, Kevin, get with it. This is the way the world works now. You're just acting like an old man, she replied. I remained silent. Her presence was still palpable on the landing as she peered into the spare room. Oh, suit yourself, Kevin. You'll come back to bed soon. I know you deny me nothing, and you know as well as I do, I'll get my own way, she said with assurance. Actually, she was correct. In a 22-year relationship, what had I ever done to suggest anything but my unrestrained loyalty and willingness to comply with everything she said and desired? It was no secret that I was henpecked and under her thumb, and now my co-workers and her friends knew full well that I was also a cuckold. I headed to my office the following morning. After entering a short while, Henry Walker, the man my wife is having an affair with, greeted me. The smug expression on his face, as if he was going to burst into laughter at any moment, made my blood boil. He smiled at me and asked, "How's your wife, Kevin?" "Hope she is good." I said nothing, just stared at him. A few grown men were giggling near the coffee maker. They just held their ground, and I just stared at them. They kept laughing at my expense as I moved past them. It seemed like everyone knew everything about me, even Olivia, the boss's secretary, who seemed to think my predicament was ridiculous and deserving of ridicule. I entered my workspace and took a seat at my desk. I was the joke of the office and the house, my day having started off in the worst possible way. I made every effort to concentrate on my work, but my rage would not go away. I made the decision to investigate my father. I looked for family history websites in that area because all I knew about him was that he was born in Cambridgeshire and that he left us in 1977 when he was 38 years old. In a matter of minutes, I found that there were 14 James Prices born in 1939 in Cambridgeshire. I was able to reduce the number of potential candidates to 3 because I knew he might have passed away years before I attended college. Since I didn't have the time to look for them all, I left messages on the genealogical websites of the towns I had located. My boss Jack called me as I was reflecting on the past 24 hours while I was sitting in my office. Right now, he wanted to talk to me in his office. Despite his success and wealth, Jack had 3 marriages by the time he was 60. He was a bully and a cheater. He belonged to the group of arrogant people who demand respect but offer none in return. I had considered leaving several times in the past, but he consistently persuaded me to stay because the pay was the best in this field. I was unaware that he was deceiving Olivia, his secretary, behind the back of his 3rd wife. Now, I hear these rumors about your wife playing around on you, Kevin, he said with candor. With your nephew? I retorted sharply. He laughed and said, "Well, yeah, that boy is a cad. It runs in the family," while I stayed silent. He spoke to me like an old school teacher punishing a student. But that's what I want to talk to you about. I don't want this to affect the business, and family comes first after that, Kevin. So if you have a problem, it will be you who will have to leave the company. Is that understood? Olivia, his eager secretary, hovered by the door while I bit my lip. Without a doubt, she was gathering information to share with her factory floor pals. I wondered why a young woman like her would go to such lengths to have sex with a filthy old man like Jack Walker as I turned to leave. I heard the same snickering as I walked by her. I lowered my head and turned to leave. I heard the explosive sound of laughter, clearly directed at me, as the door closed behind me. I came to the realization that coming here was completely pointless as I walked back to my office. I had funded my daughter's college educations, and now all I was doing was supporting my wife's extramarital affairs. I was an easygoing guy. Although I enjoyed my gadgets, I could live without the large home. Holly's indulgences, including her weekly hair and nail appointments, her car and phone, and other needless luxuries, accounted for the majority of my living expenses. Normally, I was content at work. I could express my creativity there, and I was really successful. Many of the parts being manufactured and sold here were my designs, and I knew I could find profitable work somewhere else. They simply believed that I was too frail, and they were correct. I was content and never made waves, so I wasn't the confrontational type. I was just plain old Kevin, the obedient engineer that everyone could just walk all over. I glanced at my family vacation screensaver. The page opened to my email as soon as I rolled the mouse. A message from a woman named Jennifer Holmes of the Cambridge Genealogy Committee was waiting for me. How quickly they had responded surprised me. After clicking, I perused the message. I was astounded. After reading my message asking for details about my dad, Jennifer contacted a woman posing as his niece. I was her cousin, and her name was Rachel Murray. I asked Rachel if she could get in touch with me and mailed Jennifer my number back. I felt a little happier when I left work. Holly was preparing dinner when I got home, and she smiled and came over to say hello. I took a step back and returned for dinner after a short while. She timidly said, "Can we talk about last night, Kevin?" "What's there to talk about? You made yourself perfectly clear last night. I either live with it or else, right?" I responded. She gave me a few fleeting glances while wearing a regretful expression. It did not last long as she cleared her throat, took a deep breath, and carried on. She sounded almost imploring, "Don't deny me this, Kevin. You're a great husband, and you denied me nothing." I asked honestly, "If I'm so great, why make a fool of myself and cheat on me?" She became agitated and dismissed me with a shrug. She was at a loss for words. Simply put, she was becoming conceited, and I was sick of it. There was nothing more I could do to please her. Despite the many hours I work to cover the bills and satisfy her every need, all I receive is scorn and contempt. She can drive a Range Rover that is less than 2 years old because I drive a 12-year-old one. "Look, Kevin, I have needs and you just cannot fulfill them. So, you either deal with it like I know you're going to or you lose me to a younger man." "You mean Henry Walker?" "You might as well use his name, Holly. Everyone knows he's screwing you," I said. "Okay, yes, Henry and I are lovers. He is effectively your boss, Kevin, and he'll one day take over the company from his uncle," she stated bluntly. "So, he gives me what I need now in bed, and if you do not buck up and accept the arrangement, then I'll leave you, and he'll give me everything else I want and need." I remained silent, as usual. I simply rose from my chair and entered my study. I started crying and wished I wasn't in this place at this precise moment. The phone started ringing, so I grabbed a tissue and used it to wipe my eyes. A peculiar voice could be heard on the other end when I picked it up. Rachel was the one. After an hour or so of conversation, I put the phone down and was completely happy, forgetting about everything else. Rachel was thrilled that I was researching my father, and she had a lot to share with me. My mother had been lying to me about my father's expulsion from the house, as I discovered. I was only 11 when he tragically passed away in 1983. His mother, my grandmother, had always held my mother responsible for his behavior and mental health after he departed from us. He had died from alcohol poisoning. Rachel informed me that he yearned to return to my life but was unable to do so. We planned to get together over the weekend at her Cambridge residence. I knew that the break would benefit me, so I was thrilled. The remainder of the week felt endless. The same things were happening at home, and I was frequently made fun of behind my back at work. Henry and his friends thought it would be hilarious to put a pair of underwear on the door to my office. Olivia looked at me, but she remained silent. I was broken to find a post-it note inside the underwear with the words, "Please return to your wife." That day, I sobbed while sitting at my desk. I wanted to point the finger at everyone but me. I could not wait for Saturday to come. Holly didn't seem to care what I was doing, so I told her I was heading to see a friend in London. Being away made it easier for her to screw around on me, as I had assumed. It was a stressful drive up to Cambridge. It took me an hour to locate Rachel's house after I was supposed to. Her response to me was the best hug I had felt in years, so it didn't seem to bother her. Her husband, Greg, and their 2 small children, Grace and William, were introduced to me. After completing the formalities, we started discussing my father and my new family. With her kind and giving demeanor, Rachel and Greg frequently interrupted and completed each other's sentences. I suppose they were both excited to tell our family's tale. David and Lucy Price joined us while I was there. He was Rachel's brother and also my cousin. He shared his knowledge of my father and the family, and we hit it off right away. We took a quick trip after lunch, which gave me some time to reflect. David and I talked about our jobs and our families when we got back. He could tell that things were not going well, and I told both of my new cousins about it for an unknown reason. All they said was that they wouldn't put up with it and that they would help if I needed it. I felt so appreciative. I departed Cambridge with a fresh perspective on life. Knowing that I had a completely new family who, in just one day, had shown me more kindness and honesty than the majority of people I had known my entire life gave me hope, because I had been told so many lies and had been treated so poorly throughout my life. Not just for myself, but also for my girls, friends, and new family, I needed to straighten out my life and find happiness again. It was almost 8 in the evening when I got back home, and Holly was just getting ready to go out. I said, "Where are you going, Holly?" "Out with my friends." I yelled back, "Do you mean Henry or Max?" She gave me a somewhat surprised look when she realized that I knew the identity of her second paramour. I shot her a sly glance. Her words, "Please, not all this again, Kevin," conveyed her lack of concern for my emotions. My tone became harsher. "Please, Holly, I'm asking you not to do this." It lasted only a second longer before she broke out into laughter. She stopped in her tracks and looked at me as though asking herself, "Who is this guy and who does he think he is talking to me like that? What are you going to do, Kevin? Leave me? You'll never have the balls to do that. We both know you'll always be here for me," she said with assurance. I was devastated. Her words echoed in my mind, and I dropped my head. I've always known she was a spoiled brat because she said, "For me, no balls, deny me my pleasures." Her folks had taken care of that. I was aware that, although I was the workhorse, I treated her like a queen. I always thought she loved me more than anything, even though I knew she was self-centered. I had been a fool for far too long, and I knew it. That had to stop, and I had to arrange for it to. I didn't take long to get things going. Actually, I started while she was away, so perhaps they were both taking care of her. That's probably what she meant when she said she was going to indulge herself and eat her cake. These 2 young men can approach her in any manner they choose because I am providing all the material goods, safety, and security. I was getting frustrated with my thoughts and starting to become distracted. I believe I have found a method to destroy the last shreds of affection I had left for her. I located the exact picture I was looking for inside the box I was searching for. I only had that picture of my mother and sisters. I cut out a picture of Holly's face that I had and pasted it next to them, not sure if that would work. Putting Holly's smug face in the photo might make me fall back in love with them, even though I had no love left for them. I set it up on the study desk by the monitor. By 12:45 a.m., I was wrapping things up. I had figured out my short-term plan of action pretty well. I knew roughly when I was going to leave, but it might still be a few weeks. It wasn't like Holly was counting on me to go, so I had the time. Even though I might not succeed and would undoubtedly need assistance to pull it off, I had persuaded myself to go through with it by this point. I heard someone stumble through the door, and when I turned to see what was outside the window, Henry Walker's car had driven off. I swiftly cleared my history when I heard her ascend the stairs. I would have to use incognito mode going forward. I went downstairs to get myself some coffee, but not before I waited for her to disappear into our bedroom. Sitting on the couch, I thought about my life after this place, and to be honest, I knew it wouldn't be too horrible without my daughters around. I intended to make an effort to get nearer to them. I arrived at work on Monday morning knowing that I would no longer be doing any work. For all I care, Jack Walker could fire me. I ignored the jokes and remarks being made about me as I made my way to my office. I was able to schedule a 1 p.m. meeting with the bank, and made the effort to arrange my finances beforehand. It would be a long shot, but if I was successful and got the right support, I would emerge from this situation unscathed. The meeting proceeded according to schedule, and I successfully closed my savings account and took my name off of our joint account. I pulled out my IOU, which had a few grand in it, and shoved it into my wallet. I made a stop at PC World on my way back to the office and bought a new PC hard drive, a 500GB USB 3.0 tough drive, and 2 digital voice recorders. After returning to the office, I took a seat and began attempting to access the confidential client files held by the organization. I knew they existed because I had seen them briefly earlier in Jack's office, but I needed his password. I cracked it in no more than an hour. The irony was that his 6-digit birthday, Jack24656, served as both the password and the username, which was his wife's name. I had everything I required. After connecting the drive to my PC, I downloaded every file onto it. I followed suit 10 minutes later with all of my fresh blueprints and sketches for the hydraulic pump system I had been developing that would keep this business competitive. We manufactured pumps for heavy machinery, air conditioners, and even the dairy industry. I deleted everything from my PC's history, including all of my work and plans. After that, I turned it off and took out the hard drive to install the new one. After packing everything, I reinstalled Windows. Using my phone, I looked up our competitors for the remainder of the day. I finished my monster search and headed out for the day, looking for engineering jobs in the South London area. That night, after another silent dinner, I headed for my study. I found that one of our main competitors, who had struggled during the financial downturn, was looking for a mechanical engineer who could assist in basic design and shop floor management. It wasn't entirely what I wanted, but damn near close. They were offering a salary £10,000 lower than my current salary, so I fired off an email and included my CV. I decided to sleep in our marital bed that night just to keep up appearances with Holly. However, I made sure I was asleep when she walked in. I felt her rub up against me, and I felt sick. As bad as that was, it actually pleased me to react in such a way. I was becoming repulsed by her, and this would help me in the long run. The following day, I received a call from a very surprised-sounding Robert Williams from Sutton Hydraulics. We spoke briefly, and he couldn't believe I would consider quitting Walker Engineering for his smaller company. He nearly offered me the job on the spot, but I insisted on an interview the next day. He agreed. Another vital cog had been fitted, and the wheels were beginning to turn pretty fast. I had plenty of time on my hands, so I started to research flats in the area. I found one situated 15 minutes from the girls and 5 minutes from work. I arranged for a viewing the next day after the interview with Robert Williams was finished. Next, I spoke to Jack and told him I had to go and see my daughters at Kingston the next day to sign some papers. He just brushed me off and said, "Go." That night, I called my best friend, Toby Brown. We had known each other since 6th form. We both got in at Kingston, but he studied finance and mathematics. He was now a big-time banking analyst in the city and lived with his wife, Sarah, and children in a nice house in Twickenham. Best of all, he and his wife loathed Holly, which meant we rarely socialized with each other as couples. I arranged to meet Toby the next evening after my interview and flat viewing. He knew I had something playing on my mind, but I told him I would tell all when we met. Before meeting Toby, I met my daughters and told them of the situation. To my surprise, they both were happy and displayed their frustration at their mother's behavior. They pledged their faith and support in me. A day later, I met Toby and Sarah. I told them everything that had been going on, including the first part of my plans. They were more surprised that I was fighting back than by Holly's infidelity. To them, that was pretty much par for the course in their eyes. "So, why leave her now, Kevin?" Sarah asked, handing me another cup of tea. I told them all about the meeting with my cousins and the truth about my dad being kicked out of the house by my mom and how my sisters took her side. My dad was just like me, or shall I say, I was like him. But this time, my girls are on my side, so it was that discovery that triggered me into finally standing up for myself, Toby asked, concern etched on his face. No, I was taken to my father's grave. I was hesitant at first, but I managed to lay some flowers and say a few words. It was then I looked at the etching on the stone that left me shocked. It was then I knew I had to leave, I explained. "What was it, Kevin?" they said in unison. It had an image of a rose, and below that, it said "in loving memory." It had the date of his birth, and below that, it said the age he was when he died. There was a period of silence before I spoke again. "He died at the age of 44, the age I am now," I said clearly. I decided I wasn't going to kill myself trying to be the perfect husband anymore, being abused and ridiculed in the process. I felt weaker at that point than I had in weeks. Admitting to my friends how low I had been was harder than I imagined. Toby shook me out of my mood. "What do you need from us, Kevin? Please say no if it's too much." "But I have a plan to protect myself and screw them over," Sarah interjected. I smiled and nodded. I guess Sarah did have a tough side to her character. When I thought she was having an affair in 2008, I opened a separate savings account and put all my bonuses and any spare cash into it. It was also with a stroke of luck that the only way we could get a mortgage for the amount we needed was if I applied in my name only. Holly had no real work history, so it was just easier for me to apply alone. I knew if anyone was capable of following my train of thought, it would be Toby. I asked Toby to transfer the ownership of my house to a new company that he would create. I would pay off the mortgage. All I needed to do was contact the land registry and transfer the deeds into his company. Toby was skeptical. I told him that he would have no money to fight the case, and her parents would not support her if they found out that she was sleeping around. They were religious and valued their ethics more than their daughter. They agreed and even offered to help cover the mortgage, stating that I could pay later. On my way home, I went to the local Land Rover dealership. I knew the guy because it is where I purchased Holly's Range Rover Sport about 10 months ago. I was still paying for it. In fact, I had an idea of how to get some more money. I told him that I want to exchange Holly's car for the latest model. We came to an agreement that he would take the Range Rover back, and we would cancel our payment plan. I promised to return to upgrade my car, and he knew he could make up the cost of Holly's car by selling it as practically brand new. I apologized for any inconvenience, but the thought of selling me an expensive new Range Rover more than made up for it. On the way out, I took a 2016 brochure, not for me, but for Holly. When I got home, Holly was sat in the lounge nursing a coffee and looking a bit pale. I took off my jacket and threw my bag down onto the floor. I had to now work on the second part of the plan. I told Holly that I still love her and I want my wife to have the best of everything, so I'm going to trade her car in and buy her this, I said, pointing to a new 2017 model inside the brochure. "Oh wow, I love it," she said, oblivious to my plan. "You always know how to make me feel better, don't you, Kevin? The only problem is that they have a buyer for your car already, so I need to get it down there by Friday afternoon. I'll finish work early and take it to the dealership, and then for the weekend, you can just use mine to go visit your lovers," I said, hoping to get a response. She just nodded, as though she had finally put me in my place and I had conceded defeat. "I love you, Kevin," she said, looking at me with genuine concern. I said nothing in reply and just walked off into the kitchen. My phone began to ring, and I walked out to the back garden to take it. Toby confirmed the money had been transferred. I was good to go. The next day, I wasted no time as I entered the bank and was shown into the mortgage specialist's office. An hour later, the mortgage was paid off, and all my remaining accounts were closed. I walked a few doors down and opened a new account with another bank. I was a happy man, knowing that I wouldn't have to pay anything again, and unless Holly got a solicitor and took me to court, my smile faded. The next day, I contacted the land registry and filled out the appropriate online application. I had all the details of Toby and Sarah's new company, and within 10 minutes of applying, I was sent a confirmation email telling me it would take 3 to 5 days to complete. Once this was done, I would simply hand over the deeds to Toby, and he could register the property to his company that same day. I knocked on Jack's door. Olivia was in there with him, of course. Fridays were usually the day the dirty old bastard had his way with her, and I think I disturbed their amorous activities. She left us alone. I placed my resignation down on his desk. He looked up at me with that stupid smirk on his face. "What's this?" he asked. "My resignation," I replied. "I think it's best if I leave straight away. I'm sure with the situation regarding our families, I doubt you want me here too long." He looked dumbstruck. "I'd be grateful if you can get my P45 ready by Monday, and please don't mention this to anyone." "The wife doesn't know," I said brashly. "You can't do this, we need you," he said pathetically. "Not as much as you need your nephew, apparently. I'll be in on Monday to collect the last of my things." I pretended to drop a pin from my pocket, and when I bent down, I removed the digital recorder from my sock. I had managed to construct a pin to it, and as I stood back up, I hit record and pushed it up under the seat and into the wooden frame. "If that's all, Jack, I have things to do." "Okay, Kevin, but don't come crawling back when you're skint. Your money is the only thing keeping that cheating wife of yours with you. Do you realize that?" "Of course I know that, Jack." "I wish my wife was as loyal as yours," I said, smiling. I knew that one hit him where it hurt. I turned and left his office. An hour later, I drove home and picked up Holly's car and logbook. I drove to the dealership and dropped off her car. Thankfully, John Reeves offered to drive me home. I gladly accepted. When I got home that night, Holly was sitting at the kitchen table with big red bags under her eyes. I knew she had been crying. I asked her what happened. She reluctantly told me that she got gonorrhea. I laughed, did I laugh, and she just glared at me. "Well, just take the drugs, and soon enough, you will be back on your back." Oops, I mean feet. If looks could kill, I would be dead already. I slept well that night, for the first time in months. Of course, I slept in the spare room. Saturday morning, and I was feeling great. The good night's sleep definitely helped me, and I went into our bedroom and woke Holly in bed to tell her I was going to give her some space to rest and recover. "You think I'm disgusting, don't you?" she said. I said nothing, and suddenly the tears began to flow down her cheeks. "I just want you to get better, that's all," I said. "Oh Kevin, I do love you so much. I think I've messed up big time." At first, I felt bad for her, but it disappeared even quicker than I thought it would. That shocked me a little. I realized then I had lost all love for the woman I had been married to for 21 years. Could it really disappear that quickly? Obviously, it could because I was done, and her situation did nothing to slow me down. I left the room after saying nothing. I got into my car and drove away happily. That night, I stayed with Toby and Sarah, who threw a dinner party with many of their friends and colleagues in attendance. When I arrived home late Sunday morning, I found Holly up doing housework. I walked into the lounge, and when she saw me, she launched herself at me and hugged me. I just patted her on the back. She asked, "When will her new car arrive?" "I can drop you off in town to meet your sister, and then you can ask her to drive you to the dealership. Then, you get to drive back your new Range Rover," I said with an excited grin. She smiled and walked towards me with her arms open. I turned back to the kettle, pretending I didn't see her. For the rest of the day, Holly was all around me, and I actually felt uncomfortable. She kept trying to kiss me or hug me, and I kept making excuses to leave. I think she got the message because as I went to bed, I could see that she had been crying again. "Good night, Holly. Will you be sleeping with me tonight, Kevin? I want to cuddle up to you, and I want you to tell me everything will be okay," she said. "I felt nothing, not until you get the all clear from the doctor, Holly." "Sorry, but you made your bed," I said harshly. "Well, when I get better, I'm sure I can find a man who wants to be in bed with me. I have plenty of lost time to make up for," she snapped back bitterly. I laughed to myself. It took longer than I expected, but here it was, and the was back. All those regrets from Friday night had disappeared. For the last 21 years, I would have fallen for her, but this time, I ignored her tears and headed for the spare room. The last night in my house, and it would be in the spare room. I was also glad that she said those things. It removed any sign of any doubt I might have had. I looked at my mocked-up picture of her and my sisters, and all I could feel was hatred for her. She was only sweet when she wanted something, and when she couldn't get it. I woke early Monday morning. Holly was awake early too, for her 8:30 hair appointment. So I drove her into town as planned. I drove off, knowing that could be the last time I ever see her. I somehow feared it wouldn't be, but it would for as long as I could make it so. On the way, I called the mobile phone company and terminated both our contracts. I pulled over into a lobby to pay the penalty on my card. They informed me that the phones would remain in service until 5 p.m. perfect. I then made my way to the office to retrieve my P45. When I walked into the factory, the air was serious. They must have heard about my departure because, for a split second, I noticed fear on their faces. I had no idea why. I passed the coffee maker, where the usual suspects were congregated, on my way to my office. Max and Henry were both smiling at me and cracking jokes with the other idiots, and I wasn't sure if they knew they were screwing my wife or not. "Morning, everyone," I said with delight. They said, "Good morning, Kevin. How's the wife?" to the customary chuckles. I couldn't understand how this joke was still funny. "Oh, not so good, I'm afraid," I answered back. I walked away to total silence, and when I turned around, their jaws had dropped, and Max then yelled something at Henry. "One of you bozos gave her the clap." I heard a lot of noise and turned to go upstairs. Olivia gave me a half smile as she noticed me coming, and then she lowered her head. Perhaps now I was being respected. I barely had time to knock before Jack was at the door. "I have what you want, so take it and get out," he replied. Perhaps I was just seeing that respect thing in my head. I went into his office and took a seat. I slipped the recorder into my pocket by reaching under the chair. I had it all recorded because I knew he would have given Olivia his weekly Friday stuffing. "So, do you have another job lined up, Kevin?" he asked. At first, I chose to ignore him, but eventually I gave in to his requests. "No, nothing," I responded. A broad smile spread across his face, and he probably believed that I would return to him in no time. "So, do I get my final month's pay and end-of-year bonus now, Jack?" I inquired. He laughed heartily when Olivia entered the room carrying my P45. She said, "What's so funny? Kevin here just asked for his bonus and pay. That's hilarious," Olivia added, laughing with him at my expense. I reasoned with myself and joined in. They stopped and gave me a strange look, as if I had gone insane. Olivia asked, "Why are you laughing, Kevin?" My laughter got louder and I said, "I don't know, Olivia. Why do you let this old screw you every week?" Her eyes widened, and they froze, Jack getting red in the face. I tossed my paperwork on the ground and remarked, "I bet Mommy and Daddy are proud of their little daughter." Olivia sobbed as she exited the room. "You bastard," Jack uttered. "Get thee out of my office and out of my company before I get the boys to drag you out by your ears." As I headed out the door and into my office to gather the last of my belongings, I laughed. When I got to my house, I was still giggling to myself. I exited and set down the rear seats. After opening the boot, I entered the house. I contemplated what I wanted to bring with me as I strolled around the house. I removed the few Romero Brito pieces I owned and covered them with some plastic I had discovered in the garage. I loaded them up into my car and kept gathering items throughout the house. At last, I made my way upstairs and cleared out my closet. I removed all of my documents, including my marriage license and the birth certificates of the girls, from the safe. I discovered my old belongings when I climbed the loft ladder I had found. There were pictures of my family and my degree displayed. I entered the master bedroom and removed every piece of jewelry I had ever purchased for Holly. It had to have cost more than £10,000. I then took with me all of my designer coats, purses, and shoes. I actually bought the entire wardrobe, so I took everything. Since I was always the one in charge, I had receipts for almost everything, which I needed for insurance. I could sell it all for a good price later on. After packing, I realized I would also need a TV, so I brought that along with my Blu-ray player and collection of movies. My car was obviously far too full by now. I figured I could part with all of Holly's wardrobe as well as a few other things, like some of my old clothes, that I really didn't need. The girls would be delighted to assist me in getting a new wardrobe, since a new me would need one. I gathered the most adorable photos of the girls and me and loaded them into the car. Holly wasn't going to return until after 2 p.m., so I wasn't in any particular hurry. It took me 5 minutes to make a cup of tea. You must have a cup of tea, I believe this is stated in the Magna Carta. Picking up the phone, I made a cancellation request for the internet and satellite service with the TV company. To cancel the utilities, I gave Southern Water and British Gas a call. It would take several days, but that didn't bother me. After going back to the bedroom, I sat down on the bed and noticed something that made me think of an idea that even scared me. It was in an old, dusty box at the top of the wardrobe. Holly's wedding gown was on display. I think she enjoyed it more than I did. After taking it down, I discovered our wedding album amidst the box of pictures on the bed. I snatched everything up, including the duvet cover, and made my way to the garden. I went outside and made a pile of everything in the center of the garden. I added everything I knew I would never be able to sell about Holly, including her clothes. I was careful not to touch her underwear because, well, I did not want to get sick. I got into my car and shut all of the doors. When I realized that it was only 1:45 p.m. and I was prepared to leave, I called Robert Williams and told him I could drop off my P45 later that evening with the night shift. In this manner, I could begin work again in the morning. He sounded thrilled, so I told him that I was already formulating strategies to gain him new business and enhance his hydraulic pumps, which would enable him to compete fiercely in the marketplace. I think he sensed my excitement, and as I hung up the phone, I hoped I had brightened his day. I sat waiting for the call at 2 p.m. at this point. I went into the garage, got some paint thinners, and poured it all over the wedding dress outside in the garden. Right before I lit the fire, my phone rang. "Hello," I uttered quietly. Holly yelled down the phone, "What is going on, Kevin?" I questioned sarcastically, "Whatever do you mean, Holly?" "Don't act foolish, Kevin," she went on. "Calm down, Holly. What's going on?" I responded. She was breathing heavily, and there was silence. In the background, I could also hear what sounded like her sister. "They told me you have not brought me a new car but sold mine instead," she replied. "Oh yes, did I forget to tell you that?" I replied. She became agitated and said, "What are you talking about, Kevin? What's going on?" Trying not to freak out, I said, "Well, from now on, if you want a car, you can pay for it yourself." My heart was pounding. "What?" she exclaimed. With a meek and confused voice, she said, I don't understand, Kevin. You heard me just fine, Holly. You want it, you can buy it now." "If you will excuse me, I need to tidy up the kitchen," I replied. She asked, "Is this some kind of sick joke?" I remained silent. "We will talk about this when I get home, Kevin." "I'm not happy about being pranked," she continued to scream. I said nothing. She seemed to be walking quickly to her sister's car, and I could hear her gasping for air. The door slamming proved it. She was on her way, I knew that. She could persuade her sister to come here in 5 minutes in her current state. She was now gasping for air, and I could hear the fear and bewilderment in her voice as she said, "Kevin? Kevin? Kevin?" She kept yelling my name, so I put down my phone. I went outside, lit the pile with a match. I turned away, watching our past burn up in the fire. I removed our marriage license from my pocket, tore it to pieces, and placed it on the kitchen table with a single picture of the 4 of us taking a vacation at Disneyland. I have many wonderful memories of that wonderful time. I wonder if she felt the same way. I got into my vehicle and left. Upon reaching the end of the street, Holly and Jennifer were visible in my rearview mirror as they approached the house. They just ran into the house without looking up. I grinned, turned off my phone, and stepped back. By 4 p.m., I was in Sutton, and determined I had time to get a new mobile phone contract set up at a nearby phone store. In addition, I met Freya, my new secretary, and was able to catch the administration team at work processing my P45. She was much younger than Olivia, but carried herself with a great deal of professionalism. I returned to my new apartment, which stood empty. Making a cup of tea, I located the kettle I brought from home and switched on the electricity and running water. After unpacking, I placed an order for pizza. I took up my old phone and turned it on, only to find that the service had been discontinued. With a smile on my face, I realized that Holly had also given up her phone, so the girls would have some time to calm down before I spoke with them. The following week, I was able to furnish my apartment and wasted no time at work reaching out to Walker Engineering clients to persuade them to switch to Sutton. They swiftly abandoned ship after realizing what we were offering. A few chose to stick with Jack, but most people despised him but put up with him because of the better products we provided. I really didn't care that I knew Jack would quickly figure out why his company was losing clients. I also knew Holly would figure out I was leaving when I turned off all the utilities at my former house. I knew it was safe for Toby to begin the sales process because there is no way she could afford the bills. By the end of the week, the signs were up, and Sarah took great pride in being the one to start things off. This is when Ava got in touch with me. It seems that Holly had moved in with her parents, who were not amused by their little princess's infidelity. Naturally, Holly was furious with me for what I had done to her and was after my blood. Oddly enough, I found that to be incredibly satisfying, but I knew it was not the end. I received an invitation to another dinner party at Toby and Sarah's house over the weekend. The dinner went down a storm, and for the first time since I made plans to get away from Holly, I felt totally at ease. Good news arrived in the morning on Sunday. In just 1 week of being on the market, I had already gotten 2 solid offers. I immediately accepted one for £550,000. I made plans for the money even though I knew it might take some time to finish. When it was all done, I would open ISAs in the girls' names and ask Toby to distribute the remaining funds among a variety of investment funds. In addition, I would reimburse him and take some cash to secure it in my house. I was still compelled to defend myself. After another week went by, Toby informed me that the sale might happen very quickly, which thrilled me. I gave a moving company a call and gave them the order to vacate my previous residence. When the girls called their mother, she was even more irate and menacing and asked if she needed anything. I assured the girls that everything would end soon. I was speaking with one of our new clients on Tuesday morning who had met with Jack Walker to discuss the possibility of renewing a supply contract. Jack was not shocked when he told him he was going to Sutton Engineering. He had learned that Walker Engineering had to lay off half of its workforce because of job losses. Additionally, he told me that Mrs. Walker was divorcing Jack due to infidelity. I was talking and mentally adding up the commission checks, so I had no sympathy at all. Even if he hadn't, it was probably well known that Mrs. Walker was divorcing her husband. I had no idea what had become of Olivia and her boyfriend, but I knew he had received my gift if Mrs. Walker had received hers. I wonder how her family and friends would feel about her having an affair with an elderly man. I was thinking of treating myself anyway, but Robert and the bosses were so happy with me and the direction the company was taking that they gave me a brand new Land Rover Discovery HSSE as a reward for all the new work, along with a fair few thousand in commission. In actuality, it was more than £330,000. A familiar-looking Ford Focus pulled into the parking lot as I was admiring my brand new car through the office window. When I realized whose car it belonged to, I froze. Diane's car, Holly's mother's. I took a seat in my chair and bided my time until the inevitable call. Finally, I heard my office phone ring and answered it. My secretary Freya said, "Mr. Price, there's a woman here in reception claiming to be your wife. Tell her I'm in a meeting and I'll be down in an hour." When I looked out the window 3 hours later, she was still seated. With a loud sigh, I decided to head out for the evening. I would have to deal with it if she saw me. If not, I would simply drive by. It wasn't as if she knew which car to avoid. I went to my car after leaving through a side door. I heard tires screeching as I was just getting into my car, and then I saw her, coming up behind the car and obstructing my path. With a thunderous expression, she bounded out of the car and charged towards me. She appeared terrible, wearing clearly her sister's old clothes, and her hair appeared to have gone unbrushed for several weeks. She yelled, "You bastard," as she attempted to slap me but failed. She wanted my blood and was enraged. She should stop freaking out and get in the car with me, I said. She was taken aback to see the new car when she entered. She said she wants me to come back because she's broke. I informed her that she didn't need me in her life because I couldn't satisfy her and I couldn't compete with her young studs. She continued, "Please come home, Kevin. Can we put all this behind us? I forgive you." What was it that she just said? Did I have my ears tricked? I asked, hoping I misheard, "You forgive me?" "Yes, Kevin, I will forgive you for destroying my belongings and my life," she replied. "Holly, are you crazy?" I questioned. She simply gave me the look of being the crazy one. "You openly cheat on me and disrespect me when I give you everything, and you have the audacity to say you forgive me? But I thought." "No, Holly, you only think about yourself." "I will never be with you again, so go away and be with one of your lovers," I replied coldly. She continued, "My friends treat me differently now we are separated, and their husbands have started to question their fidelity, meaning I have been kicked to the curb. I could be a bad influence, if you can believe that." Although I did feel sorry for her, the truth is that she shared some of the blame for everything that had gone wrong for her. She was paying the price for her mistake. However, how much was that cost? She had a wonderful life, which she destroyed with disrespect and greed. But I knew I had to let go and move on. I have nothing left, Kevin. I need you and I want you back in my life. I have no money and no job. When will I get my share of the house? It was there. Holly, you've never told me you love me, you just need me. I don't need you, though. Her mouth fell open as she realized what I had said, shocked as she was, but at least I knew why she was here. As for the house, I defaulted on the mortgage and lost it, I lied. I declared, I want a divorce. No, please. Of course I love you, Kevin. After more than 20 years of dating, I made a small mistake, and you burned me at the stake. A very big, unforgivable mistake, Holly, and I will never come home to you. Kevin, please, her screams resounded throughout the car as she screamed. I saw the tears in her face go away and a new resolve took their place. I want a clean break, and if you agree to it, I will give you £30,000 in cash, I said. She screamed, "You know I'll fight you in court for everything. You're too intelligent for that to have happened to you. Okay, Holly, I'll put it this way, you will never get a penny out of me." She was right, and now I was in the weak position. She turned her hips to face me and said, "Kevin, I'll fight you for everything and more. You're broke. Holly, I'll shuffle around my assets so much that it will cost you a fortune to find the money. Remember that I'm smart? Thus, by the time your lawyer discovers it, you would have incurred expenses that would completely negate any profits. I propose that you accept the money I'm offering, or I'll give it away as well. Your call, I firmly stated, keeping my gaze fixed on hers the entire time. You idiot! This is how you treat me, even though I loved you and gave you children. With anger, she uttered those words. I'm glad our girls will succeed. They will not lie or cheat, and unlike their mother, they will have selflessness instead of selfishness. Thus, please take the money and leave my life. My anger was beginning to come to the surface, and she looked at me as though I was a stranger. Okay, she said. I'll take the money and agree to the divorce. All right. I'll arrange everything, she said, slamming the door shut as she exited my car and quickly drove out of the parking lot. We tried to be civil in front of the girls, but it was difficult. The next day, I filed for divorce on the grounds of adultery, and a week later I made plans to meet Holly at the girls' flat. The sale of my house had gone through, but I refrained from investing it until the papers were signed. Holly signed the papers after I gave her the money, and I kissed the girls goodbye and wished Holly luck. She started crying again as I was leaving, but I had the impression that these were only for the girls' benefit. Ava said, "See you next weekend, Dad," as I made my way to the door. As Holly kept crying and no one was paying any attention to her, I walked back into the room and understood what Ava was talking about. Oh, the Coldplay concert. Everyone is anticipating it. Shall we travel together, or will we meet up in London? May Sophie ask. Finally, before I left, I said, I'll talk to Amy and let you know in the week. I heard Holly yelling something as I was leaving, but I decided to ignore it and went. Until we speak again, kind listener. In the event that you have read this far, kindly select subscribe. It will be very beneficial.